Open a 401k or an IRA for the first time, and at some point you hit a toggle that just says Roth or Traditional, with no real explanation attached to it. No sliders, no chart, just 2 words and a decision that's going to sit there compounding for the next 30 or 40 years. Most people pick based on a vague feeling. Whichever one a friend mentioned, whichever one sounded newer, whichever one the paycheck portal happened to have pre-selected. Here's the good news. This entire decision comes down to answering one specific question honestly. Once you know the answer to that question, the Roth versus traditional choice basically makes itself. My name's Sammy, and today we're breaking down exactly what that question is, why it works, and how to actually answer it for your own situation. Not a generic rule of thumb, an actual framework you can apply the next time you're staring at that toggle. If you've been automating contributions since the last video, this is the piece that decides which bucket that money should actually be landing in. So stick around, and if you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss what we build on top of this. First, let's clear up what this choice actually is, because most explanations make it sound way more complicated than it needs to be. This isn't about which account grows your money better. Dollar for dollar, invested the same way, a Roth and a traditional account grow identically. This is entirely about one thing: when you pay income tax on that money. That's it. That's the whole decision. A traditional account gives you a tax break the year you contribute. The money goes in before tax is taken out, which lowers your taxable income right now, and then you pay income tax on it later when you actually withdraw it in retirement. A Roth account works in the opposite order. You contribute money that's already been taxed, so there's no upfront tax break. But in exchange, every dollar that account grows to, including decades of investment gains, comes out completely tax-free in retirement. Same account, same investments, same growth. The only real difference is whether the IRS gets paid now or gets paid later. So here's the one question that decides which side of that trade actually favors you. Is your income tax rate likely to be higher right now or higher later in retirement? That's genuinely it. If your tax rate is higher today than it will be in retirement, traditional wins, because you're taking the tax break while the rate is expensive and paying tax later while the rate is cheaper. If your tax rate is higher in retirement than it is today, Roth wins, because you're paying tax now while it's cheap and locking in tax-free growth before the rate gets expensive. Let's put real numbers on that, so it's not just theory. Say you contribute $6,500 this year, and you're sitting in the 22% tax bracket. Choosing traditional saves you about $1,430 on this year's tax bill immediately, money that either stays in your pocket or gets redirected somewhere else useful. Choosing Roth costs you that same $1,430 up front, since you're contributing money that's already been taxed instead of getting that deduction. Now, fast forward 30 years. If that $6,500 grows to somewhere around $52,000, assuming typical long-term market returns, the traditional version owes income tax on the entire $52,000 when it's withdrawn, potentially $8,000, $10,000, or more, depending on your tax bracket at that point in your life. The Roth version owes nothing, zero. That entire $52,000 comes out completely untouched. The math only favors traditional if your tax rate in retirement ends up meaningfully lower than the rate you're paying today. If it's roughly the same or higher, Roth almost always wins on pure numbers, which is exactly why the one question matters so much more than any generic rule of thumb. Let's make that concrete with actual life stages. Say you're 24, early in your career, sitting in a lower tax bracket than you'll probably be in 10 or 20 years from now, once your income has grown. In that situation, your tax rate today is likely the lowest it will ever be. Paying tax now while it's cheap and letting decades of growth come out completely tax-free later usually wins by a wide margin. That's why Roth accounts get recommended so heavily to people early in their career specifically. It's not a universal rule, it's a rule that happens to fit that specific tax situation extremely well. Now, flip it. Say you're in your peak earning years, maybe late 40s or 50s, comfortably in a high tax bracket, and you expect your spending, and therefore your taxable income, to actually drop somewhat in retirement, once the mortgage is paid off and the big expenses of raising a family are behind you. In that case, The tax break right now, while your rate is at its highest, is worth more than deferring to a lower future rate. That's the scenario where traditional tends to come out ahead, sometimes significantly, especially if you're maxing out contributions and that upfront deduction is meaningfully lowering your current tax bill by thousands of dollars a year, rather than a few hundred. Most people fall somewhere in the middle of those two extremes, honestly unsure which direction their future tax rate is headed, and that's a completely normal place to be. Nobody can predict tax policy 30 years out. Tax brackets themselves change over time. Retirement income needs are genuinely hard to estimate decades in advance. And even your own career trajectory is harder to forecast than it feels right now. If you're genuinely unsure, splitting contributions between both, some traditional, some Roth, is a reasonable way to hedge that uncertainty, instead of trying to force a single confident answer out of a genuinely unknowable question. A common approach is simply splitting evenly, half and half, and adjusting that ratio later as your income picture becomes clearer. Here's a nuance almost nobody explains clearly. Whatever you personally choose for your own contributions, your employer's matching contribution always goes into a traditional bucket, by law, regardless of whether your side is set to Roth. So even someone with 100% of their own contributions going into a Roth 401k will still end up with a small traditional balance sitting alongside it from the match. That's not a mistake, and you don't need to do anything about it. It's just how employer matching is required to work, and it's worth knowing so it doesn't confuse you later when you see two different account types sitting on the same statement.
Let's look at how this actually plays out for Jordan. Jordan's 30, several years into a steady career, sitting in the 22% tax bracket today. High enough to feel real, but not at the top. Jordan's already been automating 401k and Roth IRA contributions since the earlier videos in this series, but never actually stopped to ask which type made sense. Just picked Roth because that's what came up most in searches. Applying the one question, is Jordan's tax rate more likely higher now or higher later? The honest answer is that Jordan works in a growing field, expects a couple more promotions over the next decade, and realistically sees household income climbing into a higher bracket well before retirement. That points toward Roth being the right call after all, which is a nice confirmation, but it happened to land there for the right reason this time, instead of just by coincidence. Jordan also checks the account statements and notices the small traditional balance sitting there from the employer match, roughly a few $100s a year, and now actually understands why it's there, instead of being confused by it every time a new statement shows up.
Let's cover the mistakes that trip people up here, because I see the same handful constantly. The first is picking based on buzzwords instead of your actual tax situation. Grabbing Roth because it's the one that gets recommended most in general content without ever checking whether that recommendation actually fits your specific income and career stage. The second is treating this as a permanent, unchangeable decision. Your tax situation shifts as your career progresses, and most retirement plans let you adjust your contribution split going forward at any point, usually in just a couple of clicks inside the same portal you originally set it up in. This is a decision worth revisiting every few years, especially after a raise or a career change, not a decision you make once at 22 and never touch again. The third is ignoring the employer match nuance entirely and being confused or worried when a traditional balance shows up on a statement that's supposed to be all Roth. That balance is normal, expected, and not something to fix, and trying to manually convert it yourself usually just creates an unnecessary tax headache for no real benefit.
The fourth is overthinking this decision to the point of paralysis, delaying contributions altogether while trying to perfectly predict tax rates decades into the future, sometimes going months without contributing anything at all, just to research the perfect split. Getting money into either account and actually investing it consistently matters more than optimizing the split down to the last percentage point. A reasonable guess today beats a perfect decision you never actually made because you were still researching, and every month of delay is a month of missed growth you don't get back. And the fifth is forgetting that this decision only applies to your own contributions in a given account. You can hold a traditional 401k and a Roth IRA at the same time. And for a lot of people, having exposure to both tax treatments is actually a smart form of diversification against future tax policy changes, not something you need to consolidate into just one type. There's one more wrinkle worth mentioning, because it comes up constantly in the comments on videos like this. Income limits can actually block high earners from contributing to a Roth IRA directly at all, though a Roth 401k through an employer typically doesn't carry that same restriction. If you're not sure which limits apply to your specific situation, it's worth a quick check before assuming Roth is even available to you as an option in every account type. High earners who get blocked from contributing directly sometimes use a workaround called a backdoor Roth conversion, contributing to a traditional IRA first and then converting it. But that's a more advanced move with its own tax details worth researching separately, rather than assuming it applies to you by default. So here's the whole framework laid out one more time. Roth and traditional accounts grow identically. The entire decision comes down to whether you'd rather pay tax now or pay tax later. Ask yourself the one real question: is my tax rate more likely higher today or higher in retirement? Lower income now relative to your future career usually favors Roth. Higher income now with an expected drop later usually favors traditional. If you're genuinely unsure, splitting between both is a completely reasonable way to hedge. And remember, your employer match always lands in a traditional bucket, no matter what you personally choose. It's worth sitting with how much simpler this makes a decision that trips up almost everyone the first time they see it. Not a personality quiz, not a vague vibe about which account sounds more modern, just one honest question about your own income trajectory. Answer it, pick a reasonable direction, and let the automation system from the last video actually carry it forward from there. And if you get it slightly wrong, that's genuinely okay. This isn't a decision with a permanent, unforgiving penalty attached to it. Your contribution split can be adjusted going forward as your income changes. And even an imperfect Roth versus traditional guess still beats leaving the toggle on whatever default it happened to load on. Or worse, leaving the account unfunded entirely while you wait to feel certain. The goal here was never certainty. It was just replacing a random guess with an informed one. If this made the Roth versus traditional choice feel less confusing, hit subscribe, because next we're covering what actually happens to all of this money once you're ready to start withdrawing it in retirement. So that decision doesn't catch you off guard either.